BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. The first thing I would like to say is, we have finally made our series on the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986 into a playlist. It's available in a 17-part playlist, and that'll be here in the description box if anyone would like to check that out again, or if you know somebody who is into the Zodiac Killer or true crime, feel free to share that. Once again, that's available here in the description box. The final two segments are just concluding pieces, sign-off notes, and it's really a 15-part series on the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986 by Thomas Henry Horan. On to today's case. Now, I gotta tell you that on this channel, we often just explore some things on the internet. I kind of share my journey with you through things that people are talking about here on YouTube and on various other aspects of the internet, podcast circles, the blogosphere, and everything. This might not be the most vital case to human understanding. This might not be the most evil case in the world. This might not be the case that really challenges all of human thought. But I will tell you, what we're going to talk about today, Natalia Grace Barnett, is one of the stories that is the most confusing. It's definitely one of the more perplexing mysteries out there. I first found out about Natalia Grace Barnett by watching the show This Morning. It's an ITV show from Great Britain. If you watch one of their uploads, they just have countless other things that come up in your search suggestions. And the thing is, though, they actually talk about real-life stories, and they share real stories from people who are going through just unbelievable things, and you learn a lot about humanity. That's one of the good things that they actually contribute. It's very superficial, and that's why I got more into the case of Natalia Grace Barnett, because they were interviewing this guy who was saying that he adopted a 6-year-old from the Ukraine, and it turned out that she was a 22-year-old woman posing as a child. And then, if you see that, you're just like, what? For real? I mean, that sounds pretty far out, but at the same time, I was like, I have to know more. And I mentioned that the show This Morning is somewhat superficial, so I just began watching other things, trying to learn more about the case of Natalia Grace Barnett. And according to the possibly official narrative, Natalia Grace Barnett was a girl who was born with a rare form of dwarfism in the Ukraine in 2003. I believe it's actually September 4th or September 5th of 2003, but that exact detail has escaped me. And she was adopted by a family at the age of 8. She came to the United States of America when she was 6 years old, and there are a lot of discrepancies about this. If you go through the sources, even when you're talking to the adoptive families, one family is saying that she adopted her at age 6, but then another family that says that they adopted her at age 8, and those things couldn't both possibly be true, because the family that says they got her at age 6 happened after the family that got her at age 8. A lot of things are just different. Different people are saying different things. And once again, she's been to 30 different families in the United States of America, claims that she doesn't even remember it all, claims that she doesn't really remember the Ukraine. But then there are just the family that adopted her, the Barnetts, which gives her namesake, began to notice some different things about Natalia. They said that she had full pubic hair as a kid who was supposed to be around 6 to 8 years old. And one family recorded that she had a menstruation. She had been through a menstrual cycle. Either she had a full period or she had spotted, something like that, and they believed that she was trying to hide her menstruation from the family. And then there's just other things, acting out in violence, trying to harm the other children, trying to harm the Barnett family. And they're just like, we don't know what to do. We feel like we've been scammed by someone. This woman is clearly an adult who is posing as a child because she has a form of dwarfism. Now, this is something that I have to say. I'm kind of coming late to the game. It's now February of 2020. I had not heard about this until just a few days ago. It was widely discussed in 2019. All sorts of media was coming out about this in 2019. From the summer all the way into October and November, people were putting out videos about Natalia Grace Barnett, and this really gave me the opportunity to learn about a handful of new channels out there. Inform Overload is one that has done several episodes on this. Also, I found a channel from someone named Savannah Brimer, who has done done a very large piece on this subject. Not to mention, she did an interview with Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil is someone that I've not quite had a reversal on yet, but one of the big points I would say about Dr. Phil is I now view him as someone who is a little bit less of a clown than I used to, because when he's talking to her in an interview, he's actually giving some statements that might be somewhat insightful as a psychologist. He's like, you can tell that she's thought a lot about what she has to say. You can tell that her answers are very practiced. And that's just what he just leaves it at that. And you're like, well, so where do you have to take that? She's really practiced what she's trying to say. And I was listening to the Lorden Arts channel earlier this week on Case Cracked, and John Lorden said that he doesn't like to play human lie detector. I agree with that statement completely. I don't like to play human lie detector either. And that might be a quote we're going to start using in the future from time to time. But I was watching this interview with Dr. Phil where he interviews Natalia Grace Barnett. He's like, are you 16 years old? Because she would be 16 years old as of today in 2020. Or are you a 33-year-old woman pretending to be a teenager? And I got to tell you, a lot of her body language, a lot of her facial expressions, almost seems like she's trying not to laugh at certain times. It really feels like that she is, those are the telltale signs of deception. But at the same time, as we said, we're not really going to play human lie detector 100% because sometimes someone can be laughing when they're telling the truth. It's just that they get nervous. There can be a variety of reasons, but just, I don't know. If I were to have a conversation with that particular individual, I would be like, I'm detecting some deception. Some deception has been indicated. And I'm not 100% sure, but that was just my vibe coming away from the Dr. Phil interview. Sadly, the Dr. Phil channel divides their segments up into like 3-minute chunks. So if you want to actually watch an interview or watch things from an episode, you have to just either use the playlist, click a bunch of things a bazillion times, and it gets all out of whack. They do this to get views, and their views are in the billions, actually, so I guess it's working for them. But anyway, how on earth can people not tell that this person, Natalia Grace Barnett, is she a child or is she an adult? And right now she would be 16 years old if she were born in, I guess 2003 she'd be, 2003. Yeah, they said though she would be 16 at the time of the interview. Been last year in 2019, so she'd be turning 17 this year if everything is according to her mainstream record. And one of the families that adopted her for a while, or they were looking into adopting, remember she spent time with 30 different families while she was in America, and that's supposedly between the ages of 6 and 8. One of them said their name was the DePauls, and what they said was they also have a very similar type of dwarfism that Natalia has. The thing is, though, if you look at some photos of them, you can definitely see it must be the same type of dwarfism because she could pass for their biological child. And one of the things they point out is that Natalia lost some of her baby teeth when she was with them. So that was really suggesting that, yes, indeed, she is a child. We also had a woman in the Ukraine come forward and say that she saw the media coverage and that she was Natalia's mother and she gave her up for adoption. And when they want to talk about the Ukraine, it seems like, according to the mainstream narrative, that Natalia was living in a children's home in the Ukraine. And one of the reasons why there's this discrepancy about her age is because she suffers from dwarfism, they probably didn't pay close attention to her. And in the Ukraine, they just probably wrote down 2003 on the birth certificate because they assumed that because she was smaller, she must be younger. And, that was from Inform Overload as well. They mentioned that there was a story about someone who adopted a child from the Ukraine and said, if they learn somebody's age, if he is 10 years old, if someone's taller than the 10-year-old, they must be 11. If someone is shorter than the 10-year-old, they must be 9. That's often how things were determined in the Ukraine. And Dr. Phil even said it's very possible Natalia would not know her own age because they don't celebrate the birthdays in the children's home. It's a very poorly supervised endeavor. It's just a very poorly organized system. That's why so many people are trying to adopt children from the Ukraine. That's a possibility. But to say a note about the birth certificate, when we said it's like saying September of 2003, it just says the number 3. It's like where the year mark should be, there's just a 3. So one of the things that I thought about was, Could Natalia have been born in 1993? And and they just wrote down 3 because of a paperwork error, or maybe they just wrote that down because it's the 3rd year of the decade. She could have been born in 1993, which would have made her 10 years older than she claims to be. So if she's saying that she is 26 or 27 now, depending on her birthday, then she would actually be, oh yeah, she's saying she's 16 now, depending on her birthday, so she would actually be 26 or 27 years old. It's that's possible. And this is something, though, this is why I wanted to talk about the case, because it's just like, we don't necessarily know what's going on. And I gotta tell you, though, it's a very gripping story, because you're like, is she telling the truth or not? And there's even the possibility that just all of the channels that I've cited have said, maybe she's not lying. Maybe she genuinely does not know her age. Maybe she just has a very faulty memory of the Ukraine, because people who have lived in situations where there's very poor childcare often do not have very strong memories of it. And when you talk to the people that you know firsthand who have been adopted out of those circles, they say similar things. And you hear those things very frequently, that they're adopted from Romania, they were adopted from the Ukraine, they were adopted from Russia, and they simply just do not have any memories of it at all. So they say. I haven't gone through that experience firsthand. About memories, though, I have a lot of memories about being age 4 and age 3, and I only know that because of where the family was living according to our chronology. But some people that I know personally, we're not talking about any adopted people and anyone who has been through any form of abuse, they just don't have vivid memories prior to the age of 7. And that shocked me when I first heard it, but it's actually something that's rather frequently expressed. Some people just do not have vivid childhood memories prior to the age of 7. So if Natalia did indeed come from the Ukraine at age 6 to America, and she does have dwarfism, it's possible that she just wouldn't remember any of her childhood in the Ukraine. It also would depend on how much human interaction she had in the children's home, which could potentially be very little. But the Barnett family that took her in, that got involved in all these legal issues that drawn attention to the case, they have stated that they don't even think that she is Ukrainian. They said that, and this is stuff from the first interview that I heard on this morning, the adoptive father, was saying that an adoption agency contacted them in Florida. They were trying to adopt a girl from Haiti, but because of the 2008 earthquake, they had to cancel that plan. But an adoption agency contacted them and said, we found your profile. We think we have a girl that would be suitable for you to adopt. And then they met with Natalia at a strip mall office or something like that. And she just came out of the room, ran straight to them and said, Mommy, Daddy. And they're like, some child who has never seen these people before, has just been warm and receptive to them. They also said she had no understanding of the Ukrainian language. When they had a Ukrainian friend that they introduced her to, she did not comprehend a single word of it. And the father, maybe he's trying to force a narrative. Maybe he's trying to force a pattern onto the subject. But the thing is, though, he's saying very clearly that it seemed like she just did not understand. It's not that, she's like, hey, I recognize my native language. It was more just like she just didn't know the words at all. She had never had any familiarity with the Ukrainian language, and she was just blank about it. These are some of the reasons why they believe that she isn't even Ukrainian. Some of the other suspicious behaviors that the parents noted were that they brought her to a play date with someone who also had dwarfism, and they said they began to notice that there were very, very distinct features about Natalia that were different compared to this other girl who was involved with the play date, the girl who was actually 6 to 8 years old. They're like, Natalia had a much more developed head, and you look at some of the photos of her from her childhood, and in some of them, she looks like a full-on adult. Like, if you were to look at that photo, you'd be like, obviously, that's adult just masquerading as a child. But then you look at some of the other ones, as we mentioned with the DePaul family, who also deals with dwarfism, who also has the condition of dwarfism, rather. As I said, they look like they could be her biological parents, and they also look like they're with a girl who's around 6 to 8 years old. In some photos, she looks like a little girl, and in some photos, she looks like she is somebody who is an adult. But, because of some of the things that we mentioned about how they probably didn't have very good care in the Ukraine, if she is indeed Ukrainian. A lot of people probably didn't pay attention to her age. She's probably forgotten a large portion of her childhood. I think almost many parties are in agreement that it's possible that she could actually just be 6 to 8 years older than she thinks she is, or that she claims she is. I believe I was listening to Savannah Brimer, and I don't know how she would have obtained this information, but I believe it was on that channel when they said that a therapist received a confession from Natalia that at the age of 10, when Natalia was supposed to be 10 years old, she said that she was actually 18 years old. I don't know where that came from, but that's just something that I heard on the internet. So just throwing some possibilities out there. And that would really confirm a lot of what we mentioned. And it would explain a lot of the things about how she has just lost a lot of her memories from childhood, but she's somewhat aware that she is older than 16 as of now. She would actually be about 23, 24, maybe 25 years old. But very simply, because of improper documentation, because of lack of record keeping, and because of lack of childcare, a lot of that information might simply be lost. An interesting thing happened, though, with the Barnett family. I mean, it's interesting, but at the same time, it's very saddening. They had a court order, or a court determined that Natalia was 22 years old a couple years back, and that they decided that, hey, look, this is a woman who's been pretending to be a little girl. She has scammed us. And what they did was the most famous thing that if you were listening to this, you probably heard this in the news coverage. They moved to Canada to pursue their son's education. He was a 14-year-old physics prodigy. He was accepted to a university in Canada, so they moved the family to Canada, and they decided to leave Natalia behind, and they put her in an apartment for a year. They paid the rent for a year. They gave her a book of food stamps, as well as Natalia also saying that they donated, or they just purchased a lot of canned food for her, mostly things from their cabinets that they didn't want, and that's really how Natalia dealt with things like shopping. She says very clearly she didn't really go grocery shopping. One of the neighbors would drive her to the gas station, convenience mart. That's where she would get her food. And Natalia's only about 2 feet tall, between 2 feet and 3 feet tall. She was too short to use the stove, so she said she used a microwave oven. And the reason why the Barnett family has been charged with neglect and abandonment of a dependent is, I mean, some people are saying that they didn't know 100% about her age. They didn't really know that she was 22. They just heard this from somebody. So that's incorrect. And then on the other hand, they are saying that even if she were indeed the age that they claimed that she was still a person who couldn't take care of herself. Once again, she was dealing with a very extreme medical ailment. I mean, even, yeah, something like dwarfism. She was living in an apartment where she couldn't reach the stove even. So how on earth could she take care of herself alone in an apartment that she had never lived in before, that wasn't modified at all for her? So the issue with that is that, I mean, that's why it's in the courts now. It's in the courts. But the father seemed very confident. Mr. Barnett seems very confident that he will not go to jail. That was the first interview clip that I heard, when he's just like, it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. And their defense is structured around 3 things. First and foremost, a doctor told them that she was 22. They had her age legally changed to 22. And she was never listed as a dependent. Following the change of the age, she was never listed as one of their dependents or someone who was disabled. So he says the likelihood that they're going to jail is extremely low. But aside from that, the real question that we want to talk about is, what really is the truth? I mean, is this father and mother going to go to jail for this? Probably not. But what really is the truth about Natalia? And a lot of people are leaning toward the possibility that it's just, there have been some major discrepancies with her age. Natalia is probably aware of that to a certain extent. She is probably somewhat aware that she is years older than she pretends to be. But I was thinking, though, if this were a scam, it's a pretty bad scam. You want to know how you make a scam like this? The adoption agency be like, hey, here's a girl, and all right, this family adopts the girl, they pay the fees, they pay the adoption agency, they go through the process, and then, in the middle of the night, adult Natalia breaks out, slides down the drain pipe or something, and then they disappear, goes back to the adoption agency. They try the same scam in Canada, and then again in England, or something like that. That's how you do it. I mean, this one just sounds like not a very good one. There really doesn't seem like to be an enormous motivation for somebody who is 20 to 30 years old to masquerade as a child. Like, and as I said, though, she really showed very little interest in toys. Her vocabulary always seemed more sophisticated. Now we got to talk about one sort of crazy issue here, and I do mean crazy. A lot of people have been pointing out the similarities to the film Orphan from 2009. There's something wrong with Esther. And I hadn't seen that film. So I decided to look on YouTube to see if there was a copy. There was a copy of the film Orphan from 2009, but the audio was so low, like the volume just wasn't strong at all. Either that or my devices are rubbish, but I tried multiple devices, multiple uploads of it too, but it just, I couldn't really watch the film. So this was the first film I think I've ever actually just watched in segments. They have a lot of scenes from the movie Orphan that are available online. I started watching TV shows just through clips last year. When you're following a series, it's much easier to do. But it wasn't so much about following the movie. It was just about learning about the storyline of Orphan. And not to give away any spoilers, but it's about a very similar case, almost to the nth degree, really, because some of the accusations that the Barnett family made against Natalia was that she was trying to kill them, she was threatening them with knives, she tried to push the mother into an electric fence, she was placing knives on top of the refrigerator and in the sofa, she tried to pour bleach in the mother's coffee. But, I mean, those things are very heavily disputed, and one of the things that I do have to agree with is Natalia was only 2 feet tall. How would she get to the top of the refrigerator? I mean, I'm sure that's possible. When I was a kid, I was definitely able to. I would climb up to the top of the shower head, believe it or not, as weird as that sounds. I mean, I guess she's not completely immobile, but people often discuss that one. Okay, though. So what do we really make of that? Well, the reason I mentioned the film Orphan is, if her age was as old as people say she is, if she was indeed as old as people claim that she is, then is there any possibility that an adult Natalia just watched this film Orphan in 2009 and thought, well, hey, I could do that. I could pull that off. Once again, it's a very similar story. And even dealing with someone possibly coming from Eastern Europe and families not really knowing. So it's just like, is there any possibility that it happened? I think that's a very extreme theory, but, it has been kind of discussed out there, the similarities between this and the film Orphan. A lot of people are saying some similar things about Elisa Lam in the film Dark Water, back when we were discussing that one. And sometimes people just like to compare real life to movies. Maybe there's something there, maybe there isn't. But I definitely think the Barnett family had a bad reaction to Natalia. They think that she is somebody who is someone that deceived them, that was lying to them, that was betraying them, and that's why they left her in this apartment and moved to Canada. Granted, they did have a real reason. That wasn't the only motivation. They were pursuing their son's education, but it's like, they're also just saying that Natalia was someone who was an adult woman. They felt deceived and betrayed. Like, this person is lying to us and just using us for resources. Once again, though, I have to confess that's a pretty bad scam. But we should note, though, while Natalia was living on her own, she was studying to get her GED. She was taking adult education classes. And a lot of people point that out. I don't think Natalia wanted people to know that, but a lot of people point that out. They highlight that. And what they say is that if she were ever as young as she claims to be, she would never have been studying for a GED, and she would not have taken adult education classes, meaning Natalia most likely has some